Okay, so the recording has just started.
Thanks, Dana.
Okay, so welcome everyone to the Shinrin-Yoku webinar.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
We're very excited to talk about this topic today with you all. And to begin, Melissa will share a land acknowledgement with us.
Yeah, I just want to start the webinar this morning by mentioning and acknowledging that Heartwood Healing Centre is located in the home and heartland of the Red River Métis Nation, and this is Treaty 1 territory. Treaty 1 was signed in order to take the land from 7 local Anishinaabe First Nations in order to make the land available for settler use and ownership. And also some of the lands that we also offer services include Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dene, and Dakota lands. And kind of thinking about this topic and thinking more about my connection to the land, I thought a lot about the fact that the water that sustains my life comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation, and also recognizing that through colonizations, Shoal Lake has recently no longer has a boil water advisory, but just acknowledging that my life and my family's life has thrived and has the privilege to grow on this land. I also thought about the profound Indigenous wisdom that there is regarding the land, thousands of years of knowledge connecting to the land and kind of knowing the healing possibilities of these connections. So I just want to honor that that is also knowledge that I don't have, but that is part of Indigenous knowledge on the land that I do occupy. I also want to mention that I was at a conference not too long ago, and Dr. Patricia McGuire, who's an Anishinaabe scholar who was raised on Lake Nipigon, she really invited participants to think about our own ancestral connections to the land, and kind of the idea for this webinar was really sparked by that. That was something that really stayed with me. And so I just have so much gratitude for having the privilege to listen to her wisdom and to really explore that. And I just want to move forward with cultural humility on the land that I occupy. So I wanted to mention that as we started our discussion today.
Thank you, Melissa. So we'll begin with just reviewing the webinar agreements for everyone today. So as I mentioned initially, this is being recorded. Everyone who's participating in this webinar is participating anonymously today. I'll draw your attention to the top of the screen where there's an option to enter a comment in the chat. So if you have questions or comments throughout the presentation, you can enter them here. We will have time at the end for questions and comments where we'll speak about them at length. So when you enter a chat, there's a few options. You can share a chat just to the host and panelists, which would just be Melissa and myself, or you can send it to the group, but your name will be shared when you share a comment. So if you wish for your comment to remain anonymous, you could direct it to Melissa and myself. And there's also a spot for Q&A questions. So we'll invite you to share any questions at the question section in this section. But if you have a question earlier on, you can enter it here and then we'll respond to it later at the question section. We really encourage everyone today to do whatever they need to do to keep themselves safe and comfortable throughout the length of the webinar, whatever that looks like for you. This webinar will be about an hour of information, as well as a couple guided activities, and which are invitations to participate in, and we'll have time for questions at the end. We really want to emphasize that the topic of Shinrin-Yoku is a topic that Melissa and I are beginning to learn about and explore, but we are by no means experts. And with that, we really invite everyone to take what they find helpful from this webinar and whatever resonates with them, but we recognize that certain ideas may or may not resonate with us today, and that's part of the process. So now I'm going to invite you all to join me in a mindfulness activity. So the practice of Shinrin-Yoku and forest bathing really is centered around connecting to nature. So in the guided mindfulness I will share with everyone today, I'm really inviting you to explore that connection to nature and to begin this process in this through this connection. So to begin, I invite everyone to find a comfortable position wherever they're sitting or standing today. And if you feel comfortable and safe to do so, you may close your eyes. You may wish to rest your hands on your legs or your lap, or place one hand on your heart and the other on your stomach. I invite you to begin by taking a few slow and deep breaths. With each breath in, focus on the sensations in your body as you feel the air circulate in and out. Feel your body filling with air and then releasing. Feel the energy as you breathe in and feel any tension releasing as you breathe out. I invite you to connect to your connection to nature through this mindfulness exercise. I invite you to think of an element of nature that you feel a connection to. It may be an animal, a tree, a flower, a type of weather, or a season in the year. It may offer you a sense of peace, calmness, security, joy, or strength. As you continue to breathe in and out, I invite you to strengthen the connection you feel to the element of nature you've selected. You may choose to imagine yourself embodying your element or in the presence of this element. If you imagined a bird, you may feel yourself soaring higher and higher with each breath. If you imagined yourself in a forest, you may feel the forest growing more still and beautiful with each breath. You may feel the wind whispering through the leaves. You may hear the water of a river flowing gently or rushing water representing strength and energy. As you hold this connection to nature, take a few more breaths. Take note of how you feel in this moment. Take note of how it feels to connect to nature in this way. I invite you to take a final breath. Inhale and exhale, and begin to reawaken and move your body. And open your eyes when you feel safe and comfortable to do so. Thank you all for joining me in that.
Thanks, Dana. Yeah, so I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Melissa. I use she, her pronouns. I'm one of the short-term counselors here at Heartwood Healing Centre. As I mentioned, I kind of started to think a lot about my connections to the land. So my father's family were Irish settlers to this land, and my mother was a newcomer from Japan. So really exploring Shinrin-Yoku for me has been a real experience in discovering my connection to nature, my relationship with nature and my ancestry with that nature, and kind of how I want to cultivate the natural world around me.
Thanks, Melissa. I'd like to introduce myself as well. My name is Dana. I'm one of the long-term therapists at Heartwood Healing Centre. My pronouns are she, her. I'm also a white settler on this land. My mom's side of the family has been here for several generations and are settlers from the UK. And my father's side of the family are newcomers from Germany. I've benefited in a lot of ways from the privilege of being a white settler on this land, and I've also benefited from the privilege of being a cis person in our society. Before Melissa and I started preparing this webinar, I was familiar with the term nature bathing, but I wasn't familiar with its connections in the history of Shinrin-Yoku to the Japanese practice of forest bathing. I really connected a lot to what we've learned and what we're going to share with everyone today. So I'm really looking forward to sharing this information today, and I really hope that it will be relevant and interesting to everyone participating today.
Yeah, so today we're really going to touch on this idea that there is medicine in the forest and in the land. We're presenting a bit today about Shinrin-Yoku, which is like a more Japanese-based forest bathing. But many cultures around the world have different ways of connecting to the land, many ways of knowing and wisdom and healing that people connect with when it comes to nature. There's thousands of years of expertise that draw healing from the land, especially in Indigenous cultures in Canada. But we're really going to talk about the idea that natural things have helped us survive. Part of this connection with nature is the fact that we have lived on this land for many, many years. We've lived on Earth and for our lives. So just really keeping that in mind. There's many different ways to think of this, but we're going to speak a little bit about the idea of Shinrin-Yoku. So in Japan, there's many shrines in the forest. There's traditional belief that nature is really a place of healing. In Shintoism, there are spirits, which are called kami in Japanese, and they're not separate from nature. They're in it. So they're in the trees, they're in the rocks, they're in the breeze, in the stream, they're in the waterfall. So it's really not unusual in Japan to find people going to the forest to kind of seek that connection. So we're really talking about that interconnectedness of everything and what it means to connect with the forest. I think we also wanted to mention that we really do have diverse relationships with nature. So we're going to introduce some ideas today about immersing different senses, different ways of connecting, but we really want to honor that this looks different for everyone. So everyone has different ways of finding that connection. Everyone has different ways of feeling comforted by that, whether that's, walking in a park or doing sports or growing food or doing a traditional cultural practice. So we just want to invite you to keep in mind that, just being really gentle about that, maybe noticing the different senses that really speak to you, but that everyone's different. And this is just an invitation to kind of explore what might resonate with you. Just as everyone has a different healing journey, today is just an invitation to kind of discover what the journey with nature might be.
Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah, so I just wanted to touch a little bit on kind of the translation of Shinrin-Yoku, which literally translates to forest bathing. Shinrin, which is the kind of looks like trees here, these kanji characters. That's the forest piece. And then the last character that almost looks like water, and this symbolizes a valley. That's the immersion. So it's really like immersing in the forest. And that's really kind of the feeling of forest bathing, that immersion. I also want to mention that I found this picture. It just really spoke to me. This is Takachiho, and this is on Kyushu Island, which is very close to where my mother's from. And I had visited this place many years ago, and I remember my mother telling me that that's sort of where Japan began. That's where the islands began. So I kind of found this picture. I thought of how beautiful it is there, like just these moments of awe when I was there. And then I found that there was a story related to Takachiho. So there's a story of Amaterasu, who was the sun goddess, and she hid in a cave there. And spirits came and they sang and they danced and they kind of came around the cave where she was. And out of curiosity, hearing that singing and that dancing, hearing the laughter, she came out. Out of curiosity, she came out of the cave and she returned light and sun to the world. I just thought it was a really beautiful story. And I just want to share it about that picture and kind of Japanese ideas about ties to the land and the meaning behind it.
Thank you, Melissa. So, what is Shinrin-Yoku to begin with? So, to begin trying to explain Shinrin-Yoku, I'm going to begin by explaining it with a few questions. How is it that when we're surrounded by nature and in trees, it helps many of us feel calm, relaxed, or at peace? What is it that's happening? Why is connecting to nature such an emotive and powerful experience for us? So, really getting to the heart of this will be understanding what Shinrin-Yoku is. And through this process, we'll learn how we can draw on the strengths in nature and use them to help support us in our own healing journeys and throughout our lives. Shinrin-Yoku is really rooted in the understanding that because we as humans evolved in nature, we have a biological need to connect with nature. We love natural things because they helped us survive. And when we're in the presence of nature, it helps us feel calm and safe and at peace. And this is because as humans, this is where we've lived for the vast majority of our time on Earth. When we look at how to practice Shinrin-Yoku and how to connect to this idea, it's really an important distinction between the ways that I personally have connected with nature in the past, maybe, going for a walk in nature while I'm listening to something on my earbuds or while I'm in the middle of a conversation with someone versus really allowing myself to be present and mindful and immersed in nature, allowing myself to open up all of my senses to connect with nature and then feel the benefits and the power that this brings me. So we're going to share a little bit about some of the resources that have informed us for our webinar today. So this book, it's called Forest Bathing, How Trees Can Help You Find Health and Happiness by Dr. Ching Li. So Dr. Ching Li is one of the founders of kind of connecting forest bathing to medicine and to medical practice. He's conducted a lot of studies to understand the physiological and psychological impacts of forest bathing and to provide an evidence base for something that people in Japan and across the world have understood for many years. But he's seeking to provide a scientific evidence base for this and also to provide kind of instruction for how we can all engage in this practice. So this is a book that Melissa and I read, and it really provided a lot of interesting information and research. We're also going to reference a podcast that we listened to by Amos Clifford, who's part of the Association of Forest Therapy Guides in America. And and any of the resources that we mentioned today, we'll share after the webinar in a resource list with all of you. So really, it's interesting to know that in Japan and in other parts of the world as well, forest bathing, or another term that's used is nature therapy or forest therapy, are recognized forms of medicine or prescriptive things that people can receive for their personal health. In Japan, there are several designated forest bathing forests where they have medical centers where someone can attend and receive support from a medical professional there who can help instruct them and guide them in the practice of forest bathing. So really, we see in other parts of the world that it's really integrated as an essential part of our health and recognized as an essential part of what we need to care for ourselves and for our health. And so in the next few slides, we'll share some of the benefits of forest bathing and how it connects to our health and healing as well.
Yeah, so I'll just speak a little bit about some physiological benefits. So I think for thousands of years, people have known that there are benefits to being in nature, may feel more physical wellness being in nature. But Dr. Ching Li, along with government agencies and academic organizations in Japan in about 2004, founded a forest therapy study group. And so they would go practice forest bathing, and then they would take vitals. They attempted to scientifically prove health benefits. And so some of what they were able to prove when they started these forest bathing trips were that often it lowered blood pressure, stress hormones, people's blood sugar levels reduced. It could improve cardiovascular and metabolic health. It boosted immunity. It boosted anti-cancer proteins. It improved sleep. And And part of what Dr. Ching Li really looked into was the specific maybe chemicals or what was happening to kind of bring about these physiological benefits. So he studied phytoncides, which are antimicrobial, have antimicrobial properties, and they're kind of what trees emit, and they're kind of what boosts immunity. They're a natural enhancer for immunity. They fight viruses and cancer. So people that would take maybe a three or two-day trip into the forest, they had benefits that would last for almost a month after that trip. So a lot of those could still be measured that long after the forest trip. And also, as Dana had mentioned, Amos Clifford on that talks about a lot of what's been scientifically proven studies around physiological benefits. So on the website that he has, the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy, there's a lot of articles that talk specifically about each of these benefits, but we just wanted to highlight a few of those today for you.
So we'd also like to highlight some psychological and mental health benefits of the practice of forest bathing. There's, in addition to like physiological studies, there's also been a lot of psychological studies conducted to understand the role that forest bathing can play in other elements of our healing. So some things that were shared are that it can improve mood, it can decrease rumination by engaging in the practice of being present and mindful, can help reduce anxiety, can also help lower stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline. And the connection here is to the nervous system, and I'll explain that more in the next few slides. So for our work here at Heartwood Healing Centre, being a center that supports individuals who have experienced trauma, we really want to help understand the role that forest bathing and Shinrin-Yoku can have in the context of healing with trauma and other things people have experienced. So I'll share a quote from the book that really resonates and speaks to this. Mother Nature works in harmony with us in our innate capacity for healing. So this is really the idea of tapping into the power of connection to nature and the role that it can play in our healing. And also the connection it can have to our nervous system and how that impacts people who've experienced trauma. So I'll share this diagram that helps illustrate kind of what people experience physically and psychologically when they engage in the practice of forest bathing. So it begins by immersing yourself in the forest, feeling that connection to nature, and then the impact it can have on the nervous system is illustrated in this diagram. So it can begin to help increase parasympathetic nerve activity, which is what helps us feel more calm and at rest. And it can also help decrease the sympathetic nerve activity, which is what causes us to feel more distressed or inactivates the fight or flight response. So it really helps reset the nervous system when it may be activated and help us restore us to a sense of calm. So this is really beneficial and relevant for anyone whose nervous system has been impacted by experiences of trauma, and just useful for all of us to understand and recognize. And when those impacts do happen on our nervous system, it then leads to some of the physiological and psychological effects and benefits that Melissa and I discussed. So I really want to share the context of this because it can be a really powerful, useful tool for coping and grounding for people who've experienced trauma. And it really helps show what a powerful tool this can be in the context of trauma recovery. So now that we've explained a little bit of kind of how it can impact us in our physiological health, our mental health, and our overall well-being, we'd like to begin to explain how to tap into this, how to connect to this. So I'll share a few quotes from the book that really speak to this. The first quote I'll share is that the key to unlocking the power of nature is through the senses. Let nature enter you through your ears, eyes, nose, mouth, hands, and feet. The art of forest bathing is the art of connecting with nature through our senses. So these two quotes really kind of set the scene for what we'll be inviting you to do through the practice of forest bathing, really allowing yourself to immerse all of your senses in nature. And I'll refer back to the example I shared of, the difference between going for a jog in nature versus slowly entering nature, taking a slow walk and focusing on all of your senses, allowing yourself to be mindful and present in the moment. And through focusing on connecting your senses to nature, it will bring upon the sense of mindfulness and the sense of feeling present.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to add that, it's not necessarily about explaining or naming or having information regarding the plants or what you're hearing or
Mm.
seeing. It's really moving away from the thinking and really moving into that sensory experience. So that real feeling of being in nature.
In the podcast Melissa and I listened to, they shared an example of, going on a nature walk where there's a guide telling you, listing a number of facts about the nature versus a self-led walk where you're able to notice what you notice in the forest and connect to how that makes you feel. And so we'll share a few examples of how you can do this and tap into this with all of the different senses that we can experience.
Yeah, so first we'll start with listening. Uh, and this is really about slowing down and really listening and attuning to the rhythm of the forest. I think urban noise can really add to stress, and those nature sounds can really increase kind of that rest, maybe more relaxation. So, really taking that slowly, listening maybe to the birds, and taking time to listen to the birds. Listen to the birds in different directions. Listen to the furthest bird. Listen to the closest bird. Maybe listen to the silence in between the bird calls. Taking time to listen to the sound of the wind in the leaves. Maybe the rustling of your footsteps on leaves. Maybe the sound of water moving in a stream or the sound of raindrops. Really taking that time to just notice, what are you hearing? What can you hear in those moments? And you know that maybe it's just silence, and also being present with that. Maybe just hearing that silence.
The next sense that we'll invite you to tune into is your sense of smell. I think for many of us, when we enter a forest or enter nature, we may, I've often heard people just kind of say, oh, wow, the smell. We can just be overwhelmed by the smell of nature, and really allowing yourself to just follow kind of where your sense of smell takes you, just allowing the senses to take over and immerse you. Things that you may smell in the forest could be the fragrances of the trees and the essential oils that they emit that travels through the air, the smell of flowers, the smell of soil, and the smell of rain. And again, noticing what you're smelling and how it makes you feel, what washes over you as you're immersing yourself.
Yeah, next we'll talk a little bit about touch. So again, maybe just taking a minute to really feel the forest. So as you get deeper and deeper into your experience, to just keep breathing, keep observing. And maybe the more you do this, maybe the more you're able to feel the forest. Maybe this involves kind of finding that pocket of nature and just finding somewhere to sit comfortably and feeling maybe the breeze on your skin, maybe, you know, walking barefoot in the grass. Maybe it looks like dipping your fingers or toes into a stream. Maybe it's picking up soil or grabbing soil. Um, you know, for some, the mind body connection, feeling the bark on trees, the layers, just noticing the differences and how that feels and the strength of that. Um, Some people even enjoy hugging a tree and kind of feel like that can bring about that moment of presence. Um, just noticing all of those, if you can notice any of those senses of touch around you and what it really feels like to be surrounded by that sense of touch in the forest.
Next, we'll invite you to focus on what you see in the forest. You may be noticing the sun shining through the trees, the motion of rustling leaves or blowing grass, or noticing the beautiful wildlife in the forest, or looking up at the colors of the sunset or a sunrise. Um, Something that's really interesting and going back to the kind of historical primal connection we share with nature, the colors of the forest, greens and blues, and the patterns of nature, the patterns of a flower or or branches. These are patterns and colors that we've seen in the history of us as humans. So when we see them and note them, they bring us a sense of calm. So noticing what senses you're noticing and what you feel when you focus on this sense.
Yeah, next we'll kind of think about the sense of taste. So if you're exploring the forest and you kind of are really attuned to breathing and breathing in that air, you can taste the forest. So really inviting that kind of breath in the forest or being around trees. For some, maybe tasting food from forests, whether that's fresh greens, herbs, berries, maybe herbal teas,
Mm.
anything that kind of reminds us of the taste and of the air of being in the forest. So kind of that reminder of growth and what that growth really tastes like in nature.
So once we've been able to immerse all of these senses, it really can unlock something that can be described as the sixth sense. And this can also be described as the practice of Shinrin-Yoku. So when we immerse all of our senses and connect all of our senses to nature, it can kind of wash over us with a feeling of awe, connection, peace to nature. And this really is the mindset or state or practice of Shinrin-Yoku. This is what it feels like to feel the connection of nature. And this is what it feels like to be in harmony and one with nature.
Yeah, so in kind of thinking of that sixth sense and kind of exploring that feeling, I just wanted to share kind of one of the words that was often referred to when me and Dana were reading about Shinrin-Yoku, and that word is komorebi. So this is a word that translates to sunlight shining through trees. So it's one word. And more than really being descriptive, it's kind of describing a feeling. So it's kind of describing the feeling of walking through the forest in the morning or during the day, um, noticing the sunlight kissing the ground, noticing the light, the wind, the smell, that unique moment of watching the light filter through the trees and kind of dance on the floor. So just that moment of paying attention to that and noticing that feeling and being present with it. It's ever changing, it's different every day, but it can be really beautiful when you have a moment to really sit with it. Yeah, so really thinking about, um, you know, I think Amos Curtis talks about this. So when he does forest therapy in the US, it might be a 3 hour, let's say, forest bathing trip. And the distance they go might be a quarter of a mile, like a very short distance. So it's really not the distance we really like this quote because we may not travel very far on our forest walk, But in connecting us with nature, Shinrin-Yoku really takes us all the way home to our true selves. So it's really about thinking about those moments that are different for everyone. It's that moment of being present with yourself and how that connection with nature feels for you in those moments. So, just really thinking about it being an individual experience, but an individual experience that's interconnected with nature.
Mhm.
And in thinking about that too, just also kind of, maybe no, not everyone has a forest available. We're often living in urban communities, and this isn't available. So kind of thinking about how do we find that connection with what we have available to us.
Well, as Melissa shared, we want to think about how can we access and tap into Shinrin-Yoku in our everyday lives where we may not have access to a forest, but there's a lot of other ways we can tap into nature that work for us and where we are in our lives and places. So a few examples we'll share of ways to connect to nature in the community can be through accessing parks. And this, doesn't have to be a park that has a forest, but a park with some elements of nature that you feel you can connect to. This can also look like smaller pieces of green space that are in your community. An idea that was shared in the podcast was around pockets of nature. So just finding whatever feels like a pocket of nature to you, whatever feels like nature you can connect to. This could be as small as a flower bed outside your apartment building or a potted plant that you have in your home. And also really tapping into the idea of caring for this and tending to plants can also really help us connect to the practice of Shinrin-Yoku as we connect to caring for the plant. It also can be part of caring for ourselves.
Yeah, so really thinking about, so some people might have this available. There might be a forest very close to where some of us live. For me, that is not something I have available. Um, but Dr. Chingley talks about this. So how do we find those little pockets of nature? How do we find those pieces and kind of incorporate them into our living spaces? So, talking about houseplants, and that's the caring and tending for the houseplants. It's the looking at the greenery. It's maybe touching it and um, feeling the plant, maybe smelling it. A lot of the senses can really be immersed in taking those moments with a houseplant. Dr. Chingley also did a study with aromatherapy, so he took some people to a hotel in Tokyo. They were in separate rooms, and he used a diffuser, and he used different essential oils from trees in Japan. And what he found was really remarkable. So after just a few hours of some of those trees' oils being emitted into different rooms, he would take vitals, and a lot of the physiological and benefits that me and Dana had mentioned, and even the people filling out kind of questionnaires, a lot of the psychological benefits were really proven even from that the diffusing of that aromatherapy. So, it might look different for everyone. So for some people, maybe gardening, maybe having a little flower garden, um, maybe just looking at greenery through a window or having a picnic outside. Uh, I know as I started to look into this, I really appreciated my porch so much more. The trees in front of my porch, just the greenery and the rustling of the leaves. Just I noticed how much more I tuned into that. So really thinking about how does this fit in to your life, because we all have different ways that it might benefit us.
Mhm. And this is also true in the workplace. A lot of us spend a lot of time in working indoors throughout our day, and this disconnects us from nature. So finding ways to reconnect with nature throughout our workday can be really beneficial for us in a number of different ways. And this can look like taking a green micro break, just taking a moment to step outside or look out the window and kind of reset ourselves and reset our nervous system through the feelings that we feel through connecting to nature. You can also find other ways to connect to nature without even having to leave your desk or your work area. This could be a screensaver that fills you with senses of awe and connection to nature or artwork. And this could also look like listening to sounds of nature. One of the things we'll share in our resource list is the sounds of nature from a particular forest, which are nature sounds that are completely unimpacted by any human-made sound. So really the true sounds of the forest. And I've listened to it. It really is very cool to listen to and connect to. So there's other senses we can connect to in the work environment as well.
I think one thing I also wanted to add, Dana, was I remember Amos Curtis talking about going to a retirement home
Mm,
where maybe people didn't have as much mobility. So what they did have was in the back of the retirement home, there was a small garden. And he would go there with them, and the forest bathing was possible to kind of
mhm,
try to immerse into all of those senses, really slow down, really take that time. And I really thought that was such an invitation to kind of
mm,
finding that pocket of nature wherever that may be. Mhm.
mhm, whatever it looks like. Thank you for sharing that and adding that, Melissa. So Shinrin will share another quote from the book that really resonates. Shinrin-Yoku is like a bridge. By opening our senses, it bridges the gap between us and the natural world. So we wanted to take a moment and just share some of our personal reflections and connections to the book and how it's, or to the book and the topic and how it's really kind of connected to us and what's resonated for us. So for me, it's what's really resonated for me is that Shinrin-Yoku is a practice. It's not, and it's a mindset. It's not a particular place or setting. Things don't have to look a certain way for this to be possible. All that has to happen is for us to open ourselves up to connecting and immersing our senses with nature, and then being open to seeing what washes over us and what we experience through that, and then finding ways to tap into this throughout our lives and experience the benefits. Since working on this webinar and having this more front of mind, I've really noticed myself kind of trying to reach out for those pockets and the impact it's had on me. Recently, I was walking to work and walking down the street, and I heard the sounds of a garbage truck, which is very urban, non-natural sound. But then I also looked up and saw a dragonfly flying above me, and that brought me a sense of peace in nature. So that really illustrated for me like the power that that can have in taking us back to nature and kind of protecting us from some of the rough parts of our urban environment.
I love that, Dana. Thank
Thanks.
you. Yeah, I'm just really grateful to have kind of had this time to explore Shinrin-Yoku and kind of how I can explore that in my own life. I think even going through the book or listening to these podcasts, I was really drawn to like these memories of moments where I felt just like awe, just feeling really present in nature. I think going out to my garden these days, you mentioned a dragonfly, and I was kind of at the garden weeding, and a dragonfly landed right in front of me on this very big squash plant. And in the past, I might just keep going, keep with the weeding, kind of doing what I had to do. But I really tried to take that moment and just observe at the dragonfly and really try to be still with it. And it was a real moment for me to really think about what the possibility of what is around me if I
Mhm,
can kind of take those moments for myself. Yeah.
mhm. Oh, thank you for sharing, Melissa. So, if we could, I would love to transport all of us to a forest together and we could immediately begin to be immersed in practicing this practice of Shinrin-Yoku. But in the absence of that, I would like to invite you all to join me on a guided Shinrin-Yoku meditation walk. And I'll begin that now. So in this meditation, I will gently guide you to a beautiful, peaceful forest and invite you to practice the art of Shinrin-Yoku or forest bathing. The aim for this walk will be to tune into your senses with nature and establish a deeper connection with your natural surroundings. To begin, I invite you to place yourself in a comfortable position in an environment that feels safe and quiet for you. If it feels safe to do so, I invite you to close your eyes and begin with 3 deep breaths. Breathe in through your nose, feel the air filling your chest, and hold the air in your body, and slowly exhale. Continue breathing in, feeling the breath enter, and feel the tension leave your body as you exhale. Another few deep breaths in and out. Allow yourself to sink into where you are, gently, slowly, and comfortable, letting go of any tension in your head, neck, shoulders, arms, back, legs, or feet. Imagine you are walking up to the entrance of a beautiful, lush, green forest. It is a sunny early morning. The sun is just beginning to rise, casting soft light colors in the sky. As you walk into the forest, your skin feels the difference in temperature of the pleasant, fresh air in the woods. All you hear is the sound of your footsteps, crunching on dry leaves, and the noise of the birds tweeting their soft, sweet melodies around you, as if they are welcoming you into the forest. You are surrounded by the refreshing aroma of pine trees, and you want to take a deep breath, breathing in slowly and taking in the smells of the forest. As you walk along the path, you notice lovely green moss on the rocks. The moss is softly growing in the sunlight, and you notice leaves and branches gently rustling in the gentle breeze. As you continue to walk, you feel relaxed, and your breathing pace begins to match the pace of the breeze of the forest and the breath of the forest. You stop for a moment and take in another deep breath. You notice the forest aromas combined with cool, fresh air, and inhale deeply into your body and exhale. And you smell the forest. What does it smell like to you? You feel calm and relaxed as all your senses become more and more immersed with the forest and nature. You look ahead and see sunlight shining through the tree canopy, like a shower of light illuminating your path. While you continue walking pleasantly in the forest, you see a beautiful birch tree in an open space. You walk closer and notice the beautiful smooth bark of the tree and its white and black contrasting pattern. When you look at the tree, you see the strong branches branching out and reaching towards the sky. You touch your hand to the bark of the birch tree and feel the texture. What are your fingers and palms feeling? You look up at the tree and notice a small bird sitting quietly on one of the tree's branches. Perhaps the bird noticed you before you noticed her. You sit down below the birch tree and comfortably lean against the tree, feeling the trunk on your back, and feel the gentle morning sunlight washing over your face, shoulders, chest, and legs. You feel an incredible connection, not only with the tree, but with all elements of nature around you. You feel the sense of calmness and mindfulness that fills you as your senses become more and more immersed and intuned in the forest and nature. Leaning against your tree, you feel still, safe, and content. And notice any other emotions that you are feeling in this moment. You begin to hear tree branches and leaves rustling gently. You move back slowly and walk towards the path, promising that tree that you will be back again. You continue to walk slowly as you exit the forest. Now I invite you to bring your awareness back to where you are. Notice the sounds and smells around you. Take a few more deep breaths. And when you feel ready, open your eyes and feel the deep relaxation from the virtual forest walk. So I want to share that the mindfulness meditation that I shared is adapted from a forest bathing meditation that was created by Mayumi Katoka. And she's a forest bathing guide based out of Australia. And the meditation that she created, which I adapted, and a link to her website are both going to be shared in the resource list. So this is something you can return to if you wish. And she's also created 2 other forest bathing guided meditations that you can access as well.
Thanks, Dana. That's beautiful. Yeah, so I think the last kind of piece we wanted to mention, a lot of the studies have to do with time and how long the benefits last for, dependent on time. But really, I think me and Dana discussed this, and we just really wanted to emphasize that any amount of time or any place can really have an impact. Forest therapists talk about the benefits of, let's say, spending 2 hours in the forest. But even 20 minutes or moments of connecting to nature have shown to have some of these physiological and psychological benefits. So we really just wanted to invite you to maybe explore, what is available to you, the time you have with that. I think above all, really just the time to slow down and really be as present as possible in those moments with nature and kind of just an invitation to notice those moments.
Thank you, Melissa. So we've now reached the end of our presentation and are ready to discuss some questions and comments with our participants today. So I see we already have a few questions, so I'm going to share them out. One person just commented, thank you. So I would like to say, our pleasure, and thank you to all of you who've joined us today. And the other question is, are you able to forest bathe in your backyard? And I think this was shared earlier in our presentation. So I hope that that has been answered now, that really forest bathing is possible anywhere. And it's really around finding ways to connect to nature in your own backyard and how that works for you. So thank you very much for those who shared those questions and comments. Someone has also asked if it's possible to have a recording of this shared with them or a copy of the recording. And I'm not entirely sure where the recording will be posted when it's done, but we'll inquire with our team here at Heartwood Healing Centre and let you know when we send out the resource list email where the recording will be available. So thank you for sharing those questions and comments, and I invite anyone to share any other questions or comments at this time. We'll just give a few moments for that. And if there's no questions, I would invite anyone if they wish to share too, maybe any comments on how it felt for them to participate in that guided meditation.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so someone just shared that this was an awesome program, and yeah, just grateful for the opportunity to be here. And I agree. I feel the same way. I feel really grateful to have done this with you, Dana, to just like talk about nature and the forest. Yeah, it just felt really amazing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, thank you very much for sharing that comment. And yeah, I hope that's been clear that like the kind of passion and connection Melissa and I really feel to this topic and content that we've shared today. I'll read the
Oh,
next question to you,
sure.
Melissa. You talked about Japanese being able to connect with the spirits of the forest or Japanese people. Other than using the senses, was there any other connection they used to connect with the spirits of the forest? What a great question.
Great question. Yeah, so I mean, I don't practice Shintoism, so I don't want to speak as an expert on that. But sort of what I was reading and like my experiences when I've been to Japan is that a lot of people go to worship or to pray into the forest. So often shrines are in the forest, and that's kind of the place you go for that. As to kind of how that looks for the worshiping, I think that could be different depending on the shrine, and might be something to explore. I think there, even
Mm-hmm.
in doing some of this research about forest bathing, a lot came up around kind of historically the role like nature has played in Japan. So I'm sure there is a lot available that I don't want to offer any information just because I don't practice Shintoism. So I don't want to kind of give any information that wouldn't be accurate. But from what I know, really worshiping in the nature is a very important piece.
Yeah, and that's not really something we touched on at all, but like the connection of Shinrin-Yoku and the connection to nature and how those connect to spirituality. And but I think that the way people connect to faith or spirituality could be something that they're tapping into when that's part of the Shinrin-Yoku experience for them. But I agree, it for us not personally practicing that, it's difficult to really speak to it. But excellent question.
Mhm.
Okay, someone else shared, it would be great if this was taught in schools. People need to balance the overuse of technology. I absolutely agree. It really did make me think about how much time I was spending connecting to technology versus connecting to nature.
Yeah, and Dana, even when you mentioned the micro break, like that green
Mm,
micro break, I thought about that. Even that moment to glance away from technology, even if it's a few seconds, a couple of minutes, but even the benefit of that. I know when I listened to Amos Clifford, he talked a lot about really that's part of the forest bathing therapy is that everyone unplugs. Like there's no cell
mm-hmm.
phones, there's
Yeah.
no music, there's none. It's really unplugging and really attuning to the rhythm of the forest. Yeah.
Another question, is there any research about the evidence-based practice related to the impact of healing about forest bathing for people? And yes, absolutely. There was some studies we read about in the books about the use of Shinrin-Yoku forest bathing for people who've experienced PTSD, and it was very impactful in their healing compared to people who didn't have it as part of their treatment. But that's just one of many, many studies that were found. Also, a lot studying the impacts of people who experience depression, anxiety, and those who've experienced trauma. And if you're interested in accessing some of these studies or understanding more about the evidence base, a lot of that is referenced in the book, which we'll share on the resource list. And we'll also reference the person who did the podcast, and they founded like the Association of Forest Therapy Guides, and they've referenced a lot of the research and literature as well. Oh,
Yeah, and I think also, Dana, didn't we, as we went along, we noticed like Japan has done a lot of this science research.
yeah.
So they have a whole forest medicine part of like the university. They also have doctors and therapists that will meet you in forests. But the more we kind of like did more research, we found places in New Zealand doing this. The US is doing a lot of studies. In Toronto, they're studying, doing a lot of research around this. So I think it's something
Mhm.
that's really building like a lot of that evidence-based information is really growing, and a lot of government agencies and academia is really looking into a lot of this evidence to really prove a lot of the benefits of and the healing related to forest bathing.
Yeah, and there's a clear link between where is this research being conducted and how does that impact the perspectives of the healthcare systems in those places.
Mhm.
And also you mentioned stuff happening in Canada, and one article we'll reference on the resource list is about what some practices of forest bathing in Toronto in Canada. I'll read another question. When doing your research, did you find a lot of parallels between the Japanese and Indigenous practices?
Yeah, again, I don't want to speak personally to I'm as a non-Indigenous person, I don't want to speak too much to knowledge that I don't have. But as I mentioned, when I attended that conference and Dr. Patricia McGuire sort of invited people to think about their ancestral connections to land, she really spoke about that. She kind of spoke about forest bathing in her presentation. And kind of the possibilities of links between many cultures in the world, a lot of Indigenous cultures in the world, and kind of how the Japanese view that connection with land and spirit and the healing possibilities. So yeah, I could see a lot of parallels, but also I don't want to speak too much to something that I don't practice. I'm hoping that that might be something yeah, that we might be able to find more information about,
Mhm.
or maybe have someone like an Indigenous knowledge keeper come and speak a bit more to that. It would be really interesting to explore the parallels. That would be something that would be really
Mhm.
fascinating for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something that I recall that did reference like a parallel between Japanese and Indigenous practices was the idea of in Indigenous connections to the land, viewing nature as relations versus like viewing nature as resources from which we can take from versus relations that we are giving to the nature. Like how can we tend and care for the nature? And I think there are lots of parallels, and that's why we really wanted to reference that the Japanese culture is not the only culture that recognizes the strength and healing power from nature, and that's really important.
Yeah, and I think also I really reflected as we did this research, I really reflected on years ago I attended like a land-based education conference that the Southern Chiefs Association had here in Winnipeg and kind of throughout Manitoba. And it just had me really reflecting on that. So I think there's so much wisdom and knowledge about the land here. So yeah, it's just something I would be really interested in hearing more about and
Mm-hmm.
learning more
I
about.
agree. Mm-hmm. Another interesting question: is there a certain temperature that resonates with forest bathing? Winter versus summer benefits, mountains versus ocean differences? Very interesting question. I don't recall them saying like certain times of the year anything is better, but I really noticed like when we were reading the book by Dr. Ching Li, which he gave so many examples of, connecting to nature in Japan and talking about what their forests are like or what essential oils they have. And that really just allowed me to think, oh, how does that make sense for me and what I experience in nature here in my setting in Manitoba? So I think that this is something that can be transferred at any point in the year or any point in time. I think especially us here in the winter might be a time where we feel nature is less present or feel less connected to nature because we're drawn more into indoors. But I think those could be really interesting, really great opportunities to engage in Shinrin-Yoku and to notice what nature we are connected to in those times of the year.
Yeah, I really love this question because I
Mm.
think that just speaks to like the individual journey or like the possibility. I know that a lot of the senses that me and Dana went through were maybe more relating to summer, spring, or fall. However, I do remember kind of going through some of those senses, and some of it was about, if it's winter, the sound of the snow under your footsteps, like all of
Mhm.
those pieces. So maybe, yeah, maybe the senses would be really different, but it would be almost like really interesting to see what that could feel like in the different
Mhm.
seasons and even noticing the differences. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, it's really about what do you notice in nature? So that can be practiced at any place in the world, any time of the year.
Hmm. And I will say about the mountains piece, when they started the study, when Dr. Ching Lee started doing kind of the scientific research in 2004, they did go to a mountainous area in Japan, and he really
Mhm.
speaks to that area. So I absolutely think, I don't know if there's specifically differences in benefits. But really he ties in a lot of possibilities throughout the seasons, throughout the terrain, throughout, yeah, near oceans, near streams, waterfalls, all of those pieces.
Mhm. And that really, takes us back to we invite you to practice Shinrin-Yoku in wherever you are and
Mhm.
wherever place you are and take from it whatever works for you and makes sense for you. So I believe that's all the questions. There's a few other kind comments. So thank you for sharing those and thank you everyone who shared questions. Those have really made me think about some different aspects of this that I hadn't considered. And that's such an exciting part of being able to connect in this webinar and be able to share ideas.
Yeah, I feel like this is just kind of like the starting. Like I feel like
Mm,
I've just like touched the surface and kind of
mm,
understanding forest bathing.
mhm,
So I'm just really curious and hoping to like explore this topic more, to practice it more. I know on that Association of the Forest Therapists in the US, they talk about like certifications and all of those, that you can do programming. So it's just something I'm really curious about. And I really feel like this sparked more interest for me. So thank you to everyone for being
mhm.
here with us today and asking those questions. I just really appreciate that.
Yes, thank you. I really would just like to echo that. Thank you all for participating and joining us in this today. I really hope everyone will be able to take something interesting from this with them and really invite you all to give Shinrin-Yoku a try and to invite this practice into your life. And so we'll send out the resource list, but if you have any questions or other comments or anything you'd like to share with us, you can reach both Melissa and I at Heartwood Healing Centre. So we invite you to do that as well. And yeah, if there's no other comments, we'll end the webinar here.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Bye. Mhm, mhm.